Welcome to the Goodyear Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We're excited to have you be a part of this important public process. Tonight, you will have the opportunity to address the commission on both non-agenda and agenda items. The agendas and speaker request cards are located in the back of the council chambers. You must fill out a speaker request card in order to address the commission. Please hand in your completed card to a city staff member. You may check the "I do not wish to speak" option on the card. This allows you to still voice your opinion on an item on the record without having to speak. In accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, please contact a staff member if you need any assistance. Public comment on a non-agenda item will take place during the citizen comment portion of the evening. These are items that don't appear on tonight's formal agenda. The Commission Secretary will call your name when it's time for you to speak. At that time, please approach the podium and tell us your name for the record. You'll have a maximum of 3 minutes. The timer is on the screens visible from the podium. Note that you may also choose not to speak if other speakers before you have said what you wanted to say. Shouting, cheering, and loud noises will not be tolerated, and violators may be removed for disrupting the meeting. Goodyear Planning and Zoning Commission meetings stream live on YouTube and online at goodyearaz.gov. Follow the city's social media pages so you don't miss out on all that's happening in Goodyear. Thank you for coming to this meeting and being an active part of your city. And remember, it's a great time to be in Goodyear.
Good evening. The Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of Goodyear, Arizona is called to order, and we would like to have you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the Secretary note the roll?
Commissioner Smith is present, Commissioner Booth is present, Commissioner Hegedus is present, Commissioner Kish is present, Vice Chair Sambito is present, Chairman Clymer is present, Commissioner Wang is absent. We have a quorum. At this time, a vote shall be taken to excuse members unable to attend due to extenuating circumstances. Is there a motion and second to excuse Commissioner Wang from the meeting? I have a motion from Commissioner Booth and a second from Commissioner Hegedus. Please enter your vote. Motion passes.
Okay, item number 1 this evening is to approve the draft minutes of the last meeting. Will the Secretary please read the recommendation?
Approve the draft minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting held on March 13th, 2024. Is there a motion and second for the staff recommendation? I'm so sorry. One moment. On the wrong item. Oh, it went too fast. Sorry, one moment, please. Okay. Apologies. Please put in a motion and a second to approve the draft minutes of the last meeting. I have a motion from Commissioner Hegedus, a second from Commissioner Booth. Please enter your vote. Motion passes.
Now is the time for citizens who would like to address the Planning and Zoning Commission on non-agenda items. Are there anyone having a speaker card this evening?
I've not received any.
Anyone from the audience like to speak on a non-agenda item? Okay. Next is this an opportunity for any commission members to disclose any ex parte communication they may have had prior to the meeting of any item scheduled for the discussion on this agenda this evening. Ex parte communication is any outside communication commissioners may have had regarding items on tonight's agenda. Anyone? No. Okay, thank you. And as a reminder to all, the Planning and Zoning Commission is a recommendation board for the council. The commission will vote on each item and forward their recommendation to the city council. Council makes the final decision on all items. And we're going to move the agenda items. We're going to take item number 4 first, if I got my notes correctly from someone.
Correct.
Use permit for convenience use at the northwest corner of McDowell and 150th within Goodyear Civic Square.
Good evening, Chairman Clymer and Planning and Zoning Commission. Christian Williams, Planning Manager here. I'd like to introduce you all to Justin Gabrielson. Justin, at the beginning of this week, was an assistant planner here with Goodyear, and as of yesterday, he's accepted a role as a planner. So he's about to present his first item to the commission. So I wanted to introduce you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman and Commission members. Tonight, I'll be presenting for a use permit for convenience use drive-through within Goodyear Civic Square. The 1.46 acre site is located at the northwestern corner of West McDowell Road and North 150th Drive. There is a star in the middle of the map to indicate the location of the site. It is within Goodyear Civic Square, also known as GSQ. For a brief zoning history, the greater Goodyear Civic Square site was rezoned for mixed uses back in July of 2019. This site in particular was rezoned to have commercial use zoning. Since that time, several buildings within the core area have been developed or are in the process of being developed, including City Hall as well as the Gen 1 offices. While this project is not within proximity of residential and normally would not require a use permit, the GSQ PAD has drive-through uses requiring a use permit, and therefore, the PAD overrides our zoning ordinance and requires a use permit for this use. For more clarity, the GSQ letters are at the bottom right-hand corner of the site here. The site will provide plenty of space for vehicles waiting in line. There are 2 queuing lanes with a total of 24 stacking spaces before the first stopping point, exceeding our required standards of 6 spaces, as well as 9 total spaces between the first stop and the window, exceeding our standards of 4. The building is made up of 1,100 square feet of indoor dining, as well as 600 square foot outdoor patio area located here. The west elevation faces North Civic Square. The south elevation faces West McDowell Road. The north elevation faces the future Desert Flower Drive, and the east elevation facing North 150th Drive. The building matches the colors, materials, and architecture of the existing office buildings, City Hall, as well as additional buildings currently under construction. It should be noted that the site contains a direct pedestrian path to 150th Drive, a direct path to north of the site to future development, a path to the garage, as well as a direct path to the east for future sites. The drive-through will contain 2 forms of screening to further block potential visual and/or noises from drive-through operation. A mesh-wired screen wall with growing vines that matches what is used at the existing parking structure, as well as a masonry parking screen, the same as what is being used for the buildings in development to the north within GSQ. The 2 forms of screening will alternate the entire length of the drive-through, providing a visual barrier across all public roads. You can see that the steel screen panel here in green at these locations, and the masonry parking screen wall in red at these locations. This is an example of what it will look like when it's first installed and what it will look like after the vines have grown out. An enlarged aerial photo showing the access points off the site, the existing North Civic Square off of West McDowell Road and 150th Drive. The development of the site will create a driveway off of North Civic Square to access the site from the west, as well as a new road, Desert Flower Drive, off of North 150th to have access from the north. Another aerial of the site can be accessed on a right-in, right-out driveway off West McDowell Road, leading to a right-in off of North Civic Square, as well as a right-in, right-out off of North 150th Drive to then turn left off of Desert Flower to access the site from the north. We're currently working with traffic to remove the double-striped yellow line that currently exists on North Civic Square, so to allow guests to be able to turn left out of the site as well as turn left into the site. Staff has evaluated the impact of the proposed use permit to the greater community based on the use permit criteria. The use permit and the proposed use is reasonably compatible with uses permitted in the surrounding area, adequacy of the parcel size and configuration to provide for proper access and internal circulation, compatibility of the proposed hours of operation with adjacent residential areas, required traffic mitigation measures, and other concerns. With the stipulations presented, staff recommends you forward a recommendation of the approval to City Council.
Any questions for staff? Okay, you have a question?
I just want to make a comment. I really want to appreciate the effort that the applicant put into the landscaping along McDowell. When I was first looking at the project, the elevation there was rather stark, but when you focus on the addition of the vines and the walls, it's really going to look nice. It'll cover up any lack on the building, and there's quite a depth there on that landscape, so I really appreciate that.
Would the applicant like to address the commission? Nope. No one there? Okay. All right.
Couple more questions?
I have some sense.
Okay. Go ahead.
Great job, Justin, first of all.
Thank you.
This, just seeing these plans and seeing where we're headed with the city, I've lived here for 19 years now, and the growth and seeing what's going on down this area and paying attention to the needs of the people in Goodyear and the citizens and seeing what we have here. I'm just so happy that we have something like this that's going to be in the area for us to use for a very long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So can I just ask a question? I know you had mentioned that the queue, I think you said it's like 24 stacked instead of 6. But can I ask, how does that compare to like the Chick-fil-A on Dysart and like the Cane's on Dysart? Do you know?
While I can't speak specifically about those projects,
Because just from the plans, it seems pretty similar to both of those, like that double drive-through in the length. And I know those still spill out, for if you're open, and the Shake Shack won't be open in the morning, but in the afternoon, that lunchtime and that nighttime crowd, it's going to spill out onto Civic. And so that won't affect me because I won't be driving on that road. But I mean, for the city and then just for as GSQ develops, and that becomes a thoroughfare. My question, I'm just curious how that compares to those, because those are the two that I can think of that seem like they have plenty of space, but still block traffic.
One thing I'd say about the queuing is they do exceed our requirements, and if they were to spill onto a public roadway, the city would have then conversations with the business owner to make sure that they can find ways to mitigate that. But they are fairly similar in nature, so we just need to work with code and the city to work with that business owner to get the queuing and the speed under
Christian,
control.
didn't the report actually mention that if there was a problem, you guys would approach them and
That is
discuss
correct.
their permit?
Yes, so that
Yeah.
is a stipulation.
It's already covered, yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Are there any speaker cards?
I've not received any.
Anyone from the audience like to speak on this agenda item? All right, we'll close the public hearing. And will the secretary please read the staff recommendation?
Recommend conditional approval of a use permit for a convenience use for a drive-through restaurant on an approximately 1.46 acre portion legally described in that certain document titled Site Plan Attached Hereto Zone PAD within a commercial area of Parcel A South as identified in the Goodyear Civic Square at Estrella Falls, PAD, and located at the northwest corner of McDowell Road and 150th Drive, subject to stipulations. Is there a motion for the staff recommendation or a motion, or you can voice vote an alternate motion? I have a motion from Commissioner Smith and a second from Commissioner Booth. The floor is open for commission discussion.
Anyone have any?
I totally agree with Commissioner Booth. I'm really excited about what's going on in this area, and I'm looking forward to more. So you've done a great job, and I'm all in favor of this one.
Okay,
Okay.
more discussion?
All right,
Enter vote.
please enter your vote. Motion passes. Recommendation of approval will be forwarded to City Council for the April 29th meeting.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 2 is a minor general plan amendment on Cotton and Camelback. Open the public hearing. David Williams is going to present.
Okay, thank you very much, and I apologize for that, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Dave Williams, contract planner here for the city of Goodyear. We have 2 requests for the same property, and I'm going to go through them one by one as we talk about it, but we have a minor general plan amendment, and then married to this case, we also have a rezoning of this same property. So the property in question is a 53-acre site. It's currently designated as neighborhoods in the general plan, and the applicant's requesting to change this over to business and commerce. The property is south of Camelback Road, and it's right in between Cotton Lane and Citrus, right at that half-mile mark. But I want to call out a feature here on the west side of the road, which is important to delineate, and that is the 65 DNL line from Luke Air Force Base. It runs parallel with that eastern property line. So this is an area of subject of pretty intensive noise and aircraft operations. To the west, we have the Able Ranch property, and we'll talk about that a little bit. There's 2 property owners at the moment, Meritage and Tri-Point Homes over on that western side. And we have Prologis to the east and City of Glendale to the north. The current general plan, as I said, is neighborhoods, and what they are proposing is to extend out the business and commerce that exists to the east, extend that out into this particular area. This would facilitate the development of a business park-styled commercial complex where there are going to be some warehouse and office space opportunities. We do have a rough site plan we can show you on the rezoning case, but we're really just looking at the 10,000-foot view today. We're not looking at a specific site plan. It's really just to show that it can perform as indicated. There was one letter of opposition received, and that was a joint letter from Meritage Homes and Tri-Point Homes. Meritage has since removed their portion of that opposition, so the only remaining individual to that is Tri-Point Homes. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions on the general plan. If you'd like, I can roll in and we can discuss the rezoning case a little bit, or if you'd like to take the motions independently, we could certainly do that as well. And we do have the applicant, Mr. Bull, present for any questions as well.
Do you know why the Meritage went ahead and gave the approval?
Because Mr. Bull and his team have been working tirelessly.
Twisting arms? Okay.
Yeah, twisting arms and we're working with the neighbors over there to negotiate to an amicable arrangement for everybody. The concerns are on the zoning side, and that's why I'll get into that a little bit more in detail when we talk about the zoning case. But right now, at the general plan level, the minor general plan, is this appropriate to make this land use choice from neighborhoods over to business and commerce? That's the question.
Oh, I guess I kind of pictured we'd do them together, but it doesn't
we
really
certainly
matter.
can.
It doesn't really matter, because some of my questions may cross over into the other topic,
Yeah,
but
we're gonna have to do one closed, it looks like, then do the other one, so.
We can certainly present the second case as well and then back up for any motions. They just have to be acted upon independently of each other.
Right.
I would prefer if you present the whole thing and then we act independently, because then I think the questions can flow easier that way.
Then let's keep right on going.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So for the zoning, this parcel was zoned as agricultural urban. It was part of the Talaverde subdivision originally. It got peeled out as part of Able Ranch. This section was a section that was intended to be 13 rural residential lots. It was something that when they went through and took down the rest of the subdivision, they identified that this probably wasn't going to be appropriate for those larger lots. The rezoning would allow for the construction of 5 business park style buildings, and we're talking about 890-ish thousand square feet if done that way. The applicant is requesting reduction, or not requesting, they're providing reduction from the 56 feet that is allowed under the business park district down to 40 feet. They actually want to limit it to create more of a transition between the I-1 uses to the east and the residential uses to the west. So they are looking to reduce that down. And I meant to say earlier, this will be the first application, if it's approved, this will be the first application of that business park zoning district, which was just created a few months ago in these chambers. So this will be the first application of that. Here's a proposed site plan, just to show that they can get the buildings to fit on there. One of the points of concern, as you can see, is Able Ranch, and north would be to the left here. Able Ranch kind of juts out in that area into this particular parcel. Some of our discussions the applicant has had, we have had with everybody, is to increase landscaping in that area. The business park district does have an increased landscape buffer of 40 feet over 25. It does trigger a double row of trees in that area. And there would be a 100-foot setback, if built as proposed, a 100-foot setback between the building and the rear wall of those residential parcels at the closest point. Also, because of the residential parcels in there, we've included a stipulation in that basically says anything within 325 feet of those parcels must be pedestrian scaled lighting. And we're still working on the specific language to that, but that would be something that we would address during the site review process. But intending, again, to create that transition. We're going from industrial down to the business park, down to residential, and to have that transition occur naturally without creating additional lighting concerns. We did, of course, go through the normal process. We had a public meeting. Only one party attended. That was a representative from Tri-Point Homes. We did get the letter of opposition, which I've already said has been partially withdrawn. Now, what I gave you just now was modification to the stipulations. staff was still working very diligently behind the scenes, but the packets had to go out. So the packets went out, and we were then able to get everything nailed down last week for stipulation number 3 and then number 7. I've included in red here to basically say that the emergency access, if needed, and this is for the 2 access points that exist coming into this property from the west, that if they will be needed as emergency access only, that they will be secured with a gate, no chains. We don't want a drape chain. We actually want something decorative, and something that will be designed to be complementary to those surrounding homes. Now, an emergency access easement, this is a 1 in a million type of a resource. This is not something that an ambulance is going to go down, every day. This is a critical fire. This is, something where we just need those extra relief valves to get emergency vehicles in. This is not something that would be used, quite frankly, except that 1 in a million chance. These are also secured with Knox boxes. So the only people that even have access to these are the fire department. These are not, keys that the landscapers can go out and get. These are secure, hard-locked access easements. And really, they're just designed to be open, landscaped areas. You see them as gravel in different subdivisions around the city, just to get that fire truck in if we had to do that. So, and again, we would approve that during that process. And then the language to stipulation 7B was just tightened up a little bit. We only added a few words in there, but it helped tighten the language up to say when access points are approved and if a traffic signal is required. We still need to see a site plan. We still need to see some of these other things. So we can't, we wanted the language to be easily interpreted for the future based on traffic needs, based on development needs of what's going to happen, so that we can ensure we're meeting the city's obligations for traffic signalization based on what those users are. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant is also going to get up. He's got a presentation he would like to do. He has been working up until literally a couple of hours ago with the Meritage team, working on stipulations. We are in agreement with the stipulations as written. We look for an opportunity working with them to go through and further massage the language a little bit, but conceptually the intent is there. We just want to fine tune the language a little bit. So what you're seeing is the intent of the language today, but between now and council, we intend to go through and just tighten that language up and add in a few specifics related to landscaping and a few minor items just to enhance the overall rezoning. With that, I'm happy to answer questions, or the applicant is available as well.
Any further questions for David?
I have several questions.
Just a quick statement. Would you, just for educational purposes for those watching at home and for, people that are interested, how big of a deal it is to have the owner pay for the light signal? They're pretty expensive, but just maybe educate us and others how expensive they can be.
It's been a while since I've seen a cost share number. Perhaps Sarah might have that, but last I understood, a signalization intersection was probably about $750,000.
That's
And then you look at a pro rata share of that based on needs, location, and a formula that traffic uses to calculate that out. These are not small numbers by any means. Same with, half street improvements and those other sewer line upgrades, other things that would be required. They are a major investment.
Thank you.
So I understood that one of the home developers has come to some agreement, and the emergency access probably helped them with that, to help comfort them. Can you tell us what the holdup was for the other one? Was it TriPoint?
I would like the applicant to do that. He's privy to those meetings. Staff has not been privy to those
Okay,
meetings.
that's fine.
But what I can say is that our stipulations include a requirement for a vehicular non-access easement across the entire western boundary. They're not proposing, nor would we encourage, access to an industrial, commercial use to a residential subdivision. That's not what we're here. We are only looking at that 1 in a million chance just for the emergency only access. So we're already proposing as part of our stipulations to limit.
So in reading their letter, that they provided opposing the project. There were several items in there I wanted to ask about. I noticed nothing about the wall. They asked for a higher wall. Was there consideration given to that?
There absolutely was, and they are still working on that. They do have a proposal. I'm going to let Mr. Bull address that because those were his negotiations. Staff would be fully supportive of increasing the height of that wall in that area, we'll call it the protrusion from Abel Ranch. We would be fully supportive of that, and that's part of the language I anticipate would be discussed further later this evening and tomorrow morning as we have an opportunity to meet with him. But these negotiations were happening up until just before this meeting.
Very
so.
good. I also heard you speak a little bit to the lighting, and I know they talk about making it like residential height and residential consideration. Are they also willing to put reflectors in there to
Yes.
keep the light from casting across? I know I myself have had difficulty with that from a park way far away that all of a sudden happened. So the future owners there would probably appreciate that. And then can you talk a little bit, from what I understood about the use type, there are very few restrictions on hours of operation as well as delivery hours. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I have kind of a feeling of what I'd like to see happen.
Well, the business park design, and this is something that would have to be followed as part of the design standard, internalizes truck deliveries and pickups so that they would be in an internal truck court. So they would not be in those outer parking lot areas. That would be just normal vehicular scale access. As far as hours of operation, while Mr. Bull is presenting, let me run back through the code. I can't recall, I don't believe there's any hours of restrictions in the business park district. I don't believe we have
I don't
that,
think
but
there are either.
I want to verify that.
Yeah, there are
There
none.
aren't?
I didn't
Okay.
think so. So, okay. Of additional note, I do agree that I don't think the site, if someone were to pick to build a single-family AU home, this would not be where I would pick. I'd pick somewhere a little more farther away from all the noise. This doesn't seem like an ideal location. From that perspective, I think this is a more suited use. I'll wait for our conversation after, or if I have questions for the developer.
And let me let Mr. Bull go ahead and add on to this a little bit, but Luke has expressed their support of this type of a use in here over that residential.
Okay, Mr. Bull, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Ed Bull, 1850 North Central. My pleasure to be here. I'm here on behalf of NBA. NBA has been around a long time, and the family ownership underlying this property has been in the valley in Goodyear for decades. We can go into more history about properties around it if you want, but here with me this evening are both Chris Shaw and Alan Williams from NBA, and from my office is Allie Bull. So the site, as you know, and I'm going to run through these quickly, the site's outlined in red. As you can see, all along the eastern and southern perimeters of this site is industrial. Some of it's built, some of it's being constructed, some of it is approved but not yet constructed. But everything around the site along the east and south is industrial. At one point, we were requesting I-1 industrial because that was the only option in your ordinance. A few months ago, as you know, your commission recommended and the council approved BPD. Staff talked with us about it. We promptly changed it to the business park district. Back when this site was zoned AU in 2018, and you can blame me for doing that, as we were working on lots of things in this square mile at the time. This square mile was completely vacant. It had no sewer service, And I don't think you want to spend the night talking about sewer, but I could talk with you about the efforts among staff and NBA and folks involved in other development here to bring sewer to the square mile. But in 2018, there was nothing in this square mile except for the noise contour and the graduated density concept that moves west from the noise contour. And I, by the way, am a big supporter of Luke. I am not here bashing Luke at all, but the reality of dealing with Luke and the noise contour is you also deal with it with the graduated density concept, which in this case starts at the 65 LDN and moves its way west. At that time, we had to the east of us, I'm sorry, I'm fumbling around with your clicker here. We had to the east of us C2. Back when I was a young pup, I actually zoned that C2 for a different owner at the time. And so when we were working with Luke and the reality of home builders and so on, we needed to find a way to make this larger development fit within the 0 to 2 and the 2 to 4 and this and that and the other. And a way to do that adjacent to C2, a way that made some sense at that time, doesn't make sense today, was to identify an area here at the northeastern part of this site and identify it AU, which really provided for, I think it was 13 3-acre lots. In the past few years, since sewer was brought to this square mile, as you know, we have Amazon, we have Prologis, we have Sub-Zero, we have other things approved to the south, and of course, portions of Able Ranch are under development. What was C2 up here for commercial retail is now Sub-Zero, and it is not the smallest building in town. That and the reality of changes in the housing market and interest rates and all F-35s and all kinds of things convinced NBA, correctly so I believe, that we needed to do something different than AU on this site. What we're requesting, as you know, on this site, which has I-1 all along its east and south perimeters, is that we rezone it to BPD. This is the same site plan that was up on the screen a few minutes ago. It was noted importantly, not only per your BPD district, but discussions with staff. Very purposefully, the truck courts are internalized. Very purposely, the buildings are set back substantially from the west property line for reasons which had to do with how this was all configured and platting of the property to the west. The closest area is this notch along here, where the setback from the property line to the closest building is 100 feet. We do not dispute that. We do not dispute that it's a 40-foot landscape buffer along that western perimeter. Obviously, up to the north and south, it's much more than that. We voluntarily agreed to reduce the height to 40 feet, as Dave mentioned, substantially less than the BP district allows. And I'll get into it in more details if we can, but the package that I think Dave laid out on your dais talks about landscaping, talks about lighting, landscaping, a variety of things here. I agree with him. These are actually proposed stipulations that we'd offered 1 through 4. On April 4th, we offered 5 and 6. In addition, on April 5th, this afternoon, about 2:30, I received word that the package was acceptable to Meritage, and that Meritage was withdrawing their opposition, so long as we agreed to provide for stipulations like these. I agreed with staff, as Dave mentioned, that I know that there's going to need to be some wordsmithing with these stipulations in the city language that's acceptable to planning and the city attorney's office. but the spirit and intent of these stipulations is captured on this page that I think Dave has outlined to you. These are acceptable to Meritage. They, in many respects, have to do with property to, down in here and beyond, which is actually adjacent to Tri-Point, because when Meritage sold some of this land, Meritage kept the stuff to the north and west and sold the stuff in through here and south to Tri-Point. Meritage is not opposed. Tri-Point is still opposed, but I told, with my client's permission, Meritage that we would still honor these stipulations in this paper, even though they don't directly affect Meritage's property. Obviously, as you know, and some of this language is quoted straight out of your BPD district as far as creating employment, economic development, mix of business and employment uses, very purposefully done that way by your staff and your commission and council to integrate various types of uses in a development and to provide it as a buffer between industrial and residential and a variety of things in between. I believe we've done all that. I believe staff report confirms we've done all that. We, of course, talked again with Luke, and not surprisingly, Luke would rather see non-residential than residential on this acreage. This is just a quick visual of landscaping the Dickens out of the west side of these buildings. These are cross sections all along the west. A is up, I don't know what shows. A is up here, B, C. C is the one here in the middle with the 100-foot building setback. You know the dedication requirements and other requirements that are in your staff SIPs, not only right-of-way and streets, but the contributing to a signal that was discussed, bus stop somewhere along here, decel lanes as required, and so on. This just provides some background and history as to where we started, where we've come to. With increased setbacks, we removed parking spaces so there's not truck circulation or parking along the west, enhanced the landscaping, and there's more of that in these stipulations. Normally that's where I would end, but I would like to touch for a minute, if I may, on the stipulations that I believe Dave handed out to you. There's a half a dozen of them. I'll say that number one has to do with lighting. That's already covered in your zoning ordinance or in staff's recommended stipulations. This fine-tunes it some and provides really for lighting limitations along that western perimeter. Number two has to do with us agreeing. Your code, as Dave mentioned, requires, I really can't tell if this is showing up on your screens or not, but it provides for a double row of trees along the western perimeter, some of which is hundreds of feet away. This is 100 feet away. And those trees are normally to be, I think, 15-gallon and 24-inch box. We have agreed, even though Tri-Point is still opposed, to increase the size of those trees in this narrowest area to 24 and 36-inch box and be a double row, but they're 24 and 36 when they get planted. I'm out of time, but you want me to touch on the rest of these, or you want me to sit down?
We get the gist, and I appreciate it. I think what we'll do is ask if there's any speaker cards or any questions for Mr. Bull?
Yes, I have questions.
Just for questions, and then we'll talk about it in our discussion on how we're.
So in reviewing the stipulations, that first stipulation on the lighting, just from my own personal bad experience, I would prefer to see it that instead of facilitate shielding, include shielding along that bay of lots that abuts it at the 100 feet. And then I would like to understand better along the narrowest portion of the western perimeter. Can you point out where lots 263 and 386 are? Is that bay of lots there?
Yes. Is this red dot showing up? Is this one? Ah, this is better. Okay. So this is the area that we're talking about in through here. This is all open space here, and that's the row of lots that these lot numbers correspond to as we get on down through here. But
So
it's
when we
this
talk
area.
about the shielding, does that bay of lots spin around the corner there and cover those 2 lots on the exterior of that knuckle?
Actually, all lighting along the western perimeter is to be this pedestrian scale lighting that's downward directed, shielded, lighting zone 2 in the city, plus some additional limitations. That's not limited to just this area.
Okay.
That is, the lighting is all along the western perimeter.
Would the applicant be opposed to say include as opposed to facilitate? Because I would hate to see the residents having to come and ask each one individually to have the lights behind their house shielded. That end of stipulation number 1 is phrased to say to facilitate shielding, and I would rather see it say to include shielding.
I think, fine, with what you're saying, I'm just not, are you talking about,
They handed out an email to us that indicates what the stipulations were agreed to between the applicant and the developer. And stipulation number 1 ends with to facilitate shielding for that pedestrian height lighting. And I would like to see it say to include shielding along that particular bay of lots at the very least. But all
yeah,
of
you
them
wanna
preferably, I'd rather
yeah.
have it just do it so that each owner doesn't have to come to the whoever owns it later and ask for it.
absolutely, if, I
And
think you
then
were
if-
saying change facilitate to
Include.
provide, include, fine.
Where we talk about the narrowest portion, when you're talking about the wall, the height of the wall, and you're talking about the lots, 263 to 386, I don't know which ones those are on this image, but all I would ask is that that bay of lots there on that west side of your development shift also around the corner to those 2 larger lots at the bottom of the knuckle there, so that their outside would also have that higher wall. It may already be included, I don't know, just from numbers.
So this is the row of lots that's talked about in our stipulation 5. And I know from discussion out in the lobby that staff wants us to work with staff and the city attorney's office on the wording of stipulation 5, which we're happy to do. We're happy if this home builder wants to put an 8-foot wall along the back of their lots, and I don't think the city attorney wants this in a official city stipulation, but we're happy to share in the cost of that with them. I think you're asking that we bring it, down here to these 2 lots?
Just around the corner, those 2 lots at the corner.
Right here?
All along the bay and then around just the 2,
That's fine.
yeah.
And then as we put into this, well, maybe it wasn't in this, it was an email back and forth to the home builders. And I'm sure this isn't a problem with city staff because they don't like walls 3 inches or 6 inches apart. We want to make sure if the home builder of these lots puts in an 8-foot wall,
It's written
we're
that
not
way.
supposed to have one 3 inches away.
Yeah, it's clear.
And-
It's clear in there. I just want to I wanted to understand which lots they were and make sure it not turned around that corner. That's all.
Yes, and that's fine, and we'll work with staff on the
Perfect.
exact language. And we put in here, if I remember correctly, it's been a week or so since I wrote this, if that home builder wants to build an 8-foot wall further around here, we are not opposed to that, and I'm happy to go on the record saying we're not opposed to that. You probably don't
think
want to
it's-
know
yeah,
whether
I
I
agree
think
with
it's
you, though. I don't-
necessary or not,
Yeah, I don't
but
think
we're
it's
not opposed.
necessary beyond there. I don't think so.
So,
That was all I had for you.
thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. Are there any speaker cards?
I have not received any.
Anyone from the audience like to speak on this? Going to close the public hearing, and I guess we should read the recommendation from staff for agenda item number 2 first.
Yeah, we will do the general plan amendment,
and we'll vote, and then we'll have to open up the public hearing for the rezoning. Don't have to present, obviously, but go through the motions and vote. So, all right. Recommendation is recommend approval of the request for a minor general plan amendment to amend the land use designation for approximately 53.24 acres of property generally located 1/2 mile west of Cotton Lane on the south side of Camelback Road from the neighborhood's land use designation to the business and commerce land use designation as reflected in resolution number 2024-2397. Is there a motion for the staff recommendation, or you can voice an alternate motion? I have a motion from Commissioner Booth and a second from Vice Chair Sambito. The floor is open for commission discussion.
Anything? We can do this one. The other one really talks about what they're going to do with it. Agenda item number 3.
I think the change makes sense as far as that,
But, yeah,
yeah. Yeah,
there would be, and there will be people
right there.
tell me about, they'll call these warehouses, and they'll say, when is enough enough, you know? But when you look at the property, there's only really two things you can do with it, and apparently there's not any call for a nice acre lot with a house out there.
Not
One wants
right
to-
next to where the jets fly.
Exactly, yeah.
And the fact that they agreed to
Yeah.
reduce the height of the buildings, I agree with them. That's a nice buffer between the two structures. I mean, if you consider the height of a two-story single family, it's a little higher, but it's 100 feet away at the closest. I think it's a reasonable buffer and transition.
They work with everyone, and that's been, to me,
And
just,
exactly.
you know,
Commissioner Booth, if you could turn on your microphone.
I'm sorry, I'm all alone talking, okay? And then what else too is, like, when I look at it, we need more jobs. And I like how they mentioned the job to resident, ratio, how it's actually not, decrease it, but increase it. So to me, like, you know, and they're meeting and trying to work with, residents. So to me, this is definitely, a good measure.
Agreed.
Okay, call for the vote on this item.
Okay, you may enter your vote. Motion passed. Recommendation of approval will be forwarded to City Council for the May 6th meeting. Now we can move on to the other one.
Okay, agenda item number 3, the Business Park District rezone. I'll open the public hearing. And we've already asked questions of staff. We've already asked questions of the applicant. Does anyone in the audience want to speak on this? No speaker cards?
I received any.
Anybody in the audience want to speak? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. And will Secretary please read the recommendation?
Yes. Recommend approval of the request to rezone approximately 53.24 acres located 1/2 mile west of Cotton Lane on the south side of Camelback Road from the Agricultural Urban AU Zoning District to Business Park District, BPD, as set forth in the draft of ordinance number 2024-1605. Is there a motion for the staff recommendation or a motion to recommend denial or alternate motion? You can voice an alternate motion.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, for just a moment.
Go ahead.
We just want to ensure that there's flexibility in whatever motion is made for staff to continue working with the applicant to address the concerns brought forth in that email, items 1 through 6, to incorporate what we can into our stipulations moving forward.
I would agree that we should do that, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Motions and seconds?
I have a motion from Commissioner Kish and a second from Commissioner Smith. The floor is open for commission discussion.
I think as long as those additional stipulations are in there, I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, I am too. I have no issues with it. Nothing.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Please enter your vote. Motion passes. Recommendation of approval will be forwarded to City Council for the May 6th meeting.
Thank you all. Thank you. Good to see you. Okay, agenda item number 5 is a zoning ordinance amendment for group homes. Going to open the public hearing. And David Williams is back to present.
Thank you. Okay, so what we have before you now is a zoning ordinance text amendment related to group homes. As many of you are aware, group homes has been a significant topic of discussion lately. And it's caused us to go back into our ordinance and look at the ordinance and make sure that we were complying with best practices in the industry, in the valley, and that we were aligned with our partnering agencies. So that's really where this originated from and the process we went through to get to where we are today. The definition that we have right now is assisted living homes. Assisted living homes, if you have 1 through 6 residents, they're allowed by right in any residential zoning district with no zoning clearance required. If you have 7 to 10 under today's regulations, then you have to have a quarter-mile buffer between your property and a neighboring, your property and another group home with 7 to 10 people. That's a disconnect between what a lot of other agencies are doing. There's also a change of use that's required through the building safety unit for all group homes because we have to look at the safety of those residents. They are single-family homes, but the occupants don't always perform as single-family homes. There's issues to be taken into account for ambulatory capabilities. Fire codes also kick in, so if there are over 6 residents, they have to have fire sprinklers by the building code. So there's a lot of different things in play. Just to show you the map, I've got over on the right side of my slide here. This is actually a map of every group home that we have in the city that we know about with overlays. So you can kind of see the density that we're talking about. One of the benefits we do believe with this is that we might actually have a more available housing as this goes through attrition over the years. It'll offer more opportunities. As part of the ordinance change, we're recommending to change the verbiage from assisted living to group homes. That's really the standard. We also want to create a new definition for a single housekeeping unit because how the home performs is critical. And what is that single housekeeping unit? That was something we noted in our ordinance. We had the term in there, but we had no definition to match up to it. So we wanted to have a definition that helped identify that. The new proposal would require a quarter-mile buffer for all group homes. Our proposal updates the land use tables to reflect the new definitions, the new requirements. There's also a parallel process right now for business licenses that's running. So as this goes forward, it would be married to a business license requirement. And then more importantly, we intend to clarify all of the licensing requirements internally. So the business license, the zoning clearance permit, the building permits, all of that, and then really establish timeframes so that we have a set process. The application process, it would include that zoning clearance. That's where everything would start out. They would go through with the zoning clearance. That allows some to go ahead and make application with the state. It's got to be completed within 180 days. We want to give them time, but not have to do renewals regularly because the process at the state right now is very backlogged. So we're looking to provide some opportunities so we're not having to do renewal letters and things like that when we know people are working in good faith. This also captures better the building safety change of use so that we know we have proper safety on those homes. Finance would be involved for the business license. And a lot of these things were things we identified through our internal processes that where we just had kind of disconnects as things had evolved over the years. We just had these disconnects that were occurring. So this really helps solidify and ensures that process. It gives the state of Arizona the ability to then issue the necessary licenses because they know the city has blessed it. It's okay in that city. That was another disconnect that was happening. And then as they go forward, once the state licenses are issued, then the fire department would go out and do a fire inspection on that property, and then the final zoning clearance would be approved. So we've got it outlined now, and the ordinance really helps with that outline to identify everything. Now, staff recommends approval of this. We have had a tremendous amount of vetting through the city attorney's office, a tremendous amount of research with Fair Housing, working with all of our partner agencies, the League of Cities and Towns. There's been a tremendous amount of input that's gone into this. The fire department, police department, all the internal agencies have also had a chance to review. One of the things I want to note, though, that we found in this process that all of us agreed was an interesting oddity is that foster care homes, if you fostered kids, that required you to be a group care home. We wanted to be able to support foster care better and help people out with that. So that's actually shifted into the family definition now as part of this. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. As I said, this has been heavily vetted over many, many months, but I think we've got a product here that works pretty well and serves the community's needs.
Any questions for David? Okay.
And one.
Okay.
David, can you, you're talking about verbiage here in regards to what you want to call and what the process will be. Seems more streamlined. Can you give me just a 10,000-foot view of what was and what will be so that it's more clear?
So what we had before is if you had a house 1 through 6, no zoning clearance was required at that point. Most of those never realized they needed to come in for a change of use or a business license. We then had the ones that were at that 6 number where no zoning clearance was required, but fire sprinklers were required now for the home. So there was just a lot of disconnects. We did a rapid improvement event internally several times over a few months, really to identify all of these little disconnects that have happened. And they just happened organically over the years. Group homes, as we know, was not an issue as much as it is, 10 years ago as it is today. The proliferation of them, the changing verbiage, what are they, what aren't they, how does the licensing change at the state? So we really tried to come up with a definition that's going to work today, but also help carry us forward into the future so that we don't have these disconnects again.
For example, for fire sprinklers, just picking one topic, will there still be required in the homes, or are we removing the requirement?
No, they will still be required if you have 6 or more in a care setting. Fire sprinklers are absolutely required.
Okay, so just trying to clarify if there were, if we were
No,
changing any fire
we're not
code.
changing any of the building codes. We're not doing any of that. We're just affirming that there are codes here and that there is a process. So internally, planning's been working on creating this flow sheet. And once we get everything really done through council, then we'll have that finalized and have a package that we can hand somebody and say, here is your path to your success for a group home if you wish to do it.
Thank you.
And itemize all the steps and everything necessary.
Perfect. Thank you.
I have a question. So how many group homes do we have that don't have that quarter-mile buffer right now? And would they be grandfathered in?
Yes.
Under this new?
Yes, so they would be grandfathered in right now. And what would happen is, as we go through this process, this map shows 151 known group homes. Now, this doesn't mean licensed all the way through. These are just the ones we know are out there through various databases. What would happen moving forward is somebody would have to comply. So if we have a known home there, they're going to have to create that quarter-mile separation between the new home and the old homes. As the old homes drop off the list, that either opens up an opportunity for someone to come in to that little area or open it up for normal residential use. That's why I think in the long term, when we look at the housing stock, I think this will improve the housing stock overall and create a better separation for everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there is no applicant, so is
Just
there
me.
any speaker cards?
I've not received any.
Anyone in the audience would like to speak? Okay, we're going to close the public hearing. Will the secretary please read the staff recommendation?
Recommend approval of a request to consider a zoning ordinance text amendment to Article 2, Section 2-2, definitions, Article 3, Section 3-2-2, permitted uses, and Section 3-2-4, single-family additional use definitions and regulations of the City of Goodyear zoning ordinance related to defined terms, group home separation, and allowed uses. Is there a motion for the staff recommendation, or you can voice vote an alternate motion? Motion from Commissioner Hegedus and a second from Commissioner Smith. The floor is open for commission discussion.
Anyone have anything to say? Okay,
No.
it's pretty cut and dried. Thank you. All right.
All right. Please enter your vote. Motion passes. Recommendation of approval will be forwarded to City Council for the April 29th meeting.
Okay, the next agenda item is number 6, zoning ordinance amendment for use permits. We open the public hearing. Christian Williams will give us the scoop.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Christian Williams, Planning Manager here with the city-initiated zoning ordinance text amendment related to certain use permit uses, special use permit uses, and additional considerations. So following our conversation on March 13th, we had conversations with the City Council that following week. Subsequent to that, we engaged with the development community via memo for additional feedback on those proposals and the conversations that had occurred. Tonight, we'll be discussing the staff's proposed zoning ordinance text amendment in its hopefully final form, with changes based on those conversations. And again, the overarching aim is to streamline the process and save time, proactively enhancing efficiency. And this entails exploring administrative solutions at the staff level and adjustments that create policy framework, thus minimizing the need for Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council involvement. All right. So uses that are subject to today's proposed zoning ordinance text amendment are self-storage, or AKA mini storage, service stations automotive, or AKA gas stations, and convenience stores. As a note, the council did receive updates on car washes and opted to keep that use as a use permit use. And council did not conduct the second part of the work session that y'all were privy to, which involved drive-throughs and automotive repair. That may come at a later date, and if changes are requested, that would come before you for a zoning ordinance text amendment and a proposed ordinance, as well as a recommendation. So as a reminder, for mini storage, the item may currently be constructed or considered in C1, C2, I1, and I2 with a special use permit. The zoning ordinance text amendment recommends the removal of the special use permit process in most cases. The following would apply permitted if they are permitted within a C1, C2, I1, and I2. No hazardous material storage, no buildings in excess of 3 stories. The storage may not occupy more than 500 feet of an arterial frontage. The windows and the office, other than the office, would need to be faux windows so you're not viewing in to see those garage type doors within the building, and auctions are prohibited. Storage buildings and their canopies must be located 30 feet away from residential homes or districts if they're not platted, and a minimum of a 20-foot green belt shall be provided either on the property or adjacent. All storage, if located within 500 feet of residential, shall be limited to the hours of operation from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m., which is a recommendation of this body. And in C1 and C2, on a maximum of 7.5 acres or 50% of a commercial site, and not located within 300 feet of an arterial to arterial intersection. If that is the request, it would require a special use permit, and not located within 2,600 feet of another storage unit, which is an increase from your conversation. If that is the request, a special use permit would be required. No outdoor RV storage would be permitted unless it is indoor if in the facility within C1 and C2. In I1 and I2, they would be permitted, as well as outdoor RV storage if screened. There would be no size restrictions as a means to encourage that to develop in the industrial areas. And there would be the similar design requirements, hours of operations restrictions, and distance from residential, as you saw on the previous slide. Moving on to gas stations. As a reminder, gas stations may be considered within C1 and C2 with a use permit. The zoning ordinance text amendment would remove the use permit process use permit process. Gas stations would be permitted within C1, C2, I1, and I2 districts. This text amendment would also clarify that convenience stores in general, or stores that are less than 7,500 square feet, would be permitted in C1 and C2. For gas stations, if they are not reverse-oriented and within 300 feet of a planned intersection or signalized intersection, they would require a 2,500 square foot plaza with shade structure. 50% of that may be located in the landscape setback. Gas stations would also not be permitted within 250 feet of a residential zoning district, or they would need to be separated by a public roadway, canal, or railroad from residential. The use would be allowed as an accessory use to large retailers over 50,000 square feet. Think, for example, of a Safeway or Fry's that has gasoline as an accessory use. And then no more than 2 gas stations would be permitted within a quarter mile of an arterial to arterial intersection. Those 2 gas stations would need to be on opposite quadrants of the intersection. That is a change from when the conversation occurred with y'all. And staff would clarify that electric vehicle charging is permitted at a gas station. Semi-truck fueling would be prohibited in C1. I'll come back to C2. Would be permitted in I1 and would be permitted in I2. A truck stop may be requested in I2 with a special use permit if it is not located within the Luke Air Force Base or Phoenix Goodyear Airport 65 DNL line. If you opt to approve the proposed text amendment, staff would recommend you approve the ordinance with a change to section 9 under A4 to allow semi-truck fueling in C2 if it is located in proximity to industrial zoning districts, major highways, freeway overlay district, or major truck routes with a use permit. I've provided you that language, by the way, on the dais. And by way of example, why this might be important is there are some industrial zoned areas, for example, I'll use MC85 as an example. There's large industrial areas that have commercial hard corners. They might want a gas station. They're immediately adjacent to industrial uses. That might be an appropriate area for semi-truck fueling, and we would also want to preserve the commercial corner so that maybe more restaurants and opportunities for the employees to eat at is preserved. With that overview, the proposed text amendment, staff is recommending you forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council to amend Articles 2, 3, and 4 of the zoning ordinance. We would ask, again, if you choose that option, you recommend approval and modify Section 9 of the ordinance under 4 to add a new Section B that reads, may be allowed in the C2 General Commercial District if located within close proximity to an industrial zoning district, a major highway, the freeway overlay district, and or major truck routes subject to the approval of a use permit pursuant to the requirements set forth in Section 1-3-2 use permits of the Goodyear zoning ordinance, and change the existing Section B to C and existing Section C to D. With that, happy to answer any questions you have on the text amendment.
The storage units now half a mile apart, 2,600 feet. What were they before?
Approximately a quarter mile.
Quarter mile, that's okay. So further out. Thank you. Questions? Okay. All right, thank you. And there's no applicant? Any speaker cards?
Not received any?
Anyone in the audience want to speak on this agenda item? Okay, we're going to close the public hearing. Secretary, please read the recommendation.
Recommend approval for a request to consider a zoning ordinance text amendment to Articles 2-2 definitions, 3 commercial district, 3-4 industrial districts, 4 regulations of particular uses, and 4-2 uses requiring additional evaluation of the City of Goodyear zoning ordinance related to certain convenience uses, self-service storage facilities, automotive repair, and automobile service station gas stations being permitted uses in certain zoning districts, subject to newly adopted regulations without the need for use permits or special use permits as reflected in the proposed ordinance 2024-1606. Is there a motion for the staff recommendation, or an alternate motion can be voiced? I have a motion from Commissioner Booth and a second from Commissioner Kish. The floor is open for commission discussion.
Any discussion among us? Okay.
Excuse me, is the motion just as read or with the modification that Christian had asked for?
I'd like to include the modification.
Yes. I assume that's what we were thinking about.
yeah.
As
We
modified.
should have said that. It includes all that stuff. You got it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so please enter your vote. Motion passes. Recommendation of approval will be forwarded to City Council for the April 29th meeting.
Okay, last agenda item, number 7 is zoning ordinance amendment for R1-A. Open the public hearing, and Christian is back on.
Christian Williams, Planning Manager, here before you this evening with another city-initiated rezoning, or city-initiated text amendment to amend the articles of our zoning ordinance related to townhomes, or R1A, as they are called in the zoning ordinance. So the city has recently experienced a revitalization of townhouse construction, as well as requests for rezonings to allow for townhomes. Nearby the Civic Square development here, right here, on Monte Vista, you can see that they are building a mix of product, of which some is townhomes. In fact, between 2017 and 2023, approximately 9% of all the new housing stock, which goes from single-family traditional all the way up to apartments, has been missing middle housing, which includes townhomes and court homes. In 2023 alone, approximately 102 single-family townhomes were built and finalized within Goodyear, which means approximately 285 new townhome residents call Goodyear home as of last year. Most recently, you may recall, the Las Brisas townhomes rezoning request for new townhomes and the Ascent at Canyon Trails rezone for townhomes. Both developments were seeking to develop an alley-loaded townhouse product and required a PAD overlay to accomplish that over our R1A standards. PAD overlays on top of R1A zoning districts are a more laborious rezoning process as opposed to a standard residential zoning district hard zone. Additionally, the city does have some additional areas of R1A hard zoning and or R1A within a PAD overlay. But to develop an alley-loaded product, such as the ones that have been approved recently, like at Ascent and Las Brisas, a rezoning would be required. And that could take a 4 to 6 month process. So in working with our development community on those PAD overlays, the developments have really sought to narrow the lots of townhomes and building coverages at that, alley load the garages, and in exchange for less outdoor space on the individual parcels, add public amenities within those communities, as well as add more streetscape elements. These requests for trade-offs follow the same process that the city uses and provides for flexibility within our existing R16s and our R14 reduced single-family attached lot or detached lot standards. So smaller, narrower lots, but more community amenities for everyone to enjoy. So since creating 2 PAD overlays that were nearly identical, and hearing from the Planning and Zoning Commission, the council, the communities, and our development stakeholders, and their desire for more missing middle housing, we also have recently had developers evaluate Verados-esque style townhouse product that they would like to bring to Goodyear. But again, that would have required a rezone because that process would take 4 to 6 months. And similar to the most recent ones we have, and they would be very similar to the ones that we recently approved. As a result, staff is bringing forward this zoning ordinance text amendment just to do that. And the planning team is committed to working with our development community in order to bring forward solutions for housing our growing population. And if approved, this text amendment will make it easier to develop a variety of townhouse product, adding diversity, affordability, and new housing choices to our city. So to summarize some of the changes that this text amendment creates, it allows for typical R1A townhouse lots to be reduced from 35 feet in width to 20 feet in width. And in doing so administratively, the developer would need to provide 2 amenity elements and 2 streetscape elements. If the lots are between 20 and 30 feet in width, they would need to add the 3rd alley-loaded element, and that would be required. Again, when you're that narrow, the whole front of the house is garage, so it needs to be alley-loaded. The ZOTA also clarifies or codifies standards for streets and layouts of design, private patio wall heights, and guest parking requirements. Again, this ordinance would allow by right R1A zoning districts to add a new type of housing product that does not exist by right today, thus increasing our housing supply, allows for more missing middle housing, and follows the standards that we've already approved in other R1A underlying zoning cases. The state has been looking at means to supersede local control and add housing diversity and affordability, which largely would ignore citizen views and local control. But this ordinance is a local government solution to do just that and add housing diversity that does not ignore citizens and allows for local solutions to be in place in our local community. With that, staff recommends you approve the zoning ordinance text amendment, which will make it easier to build townhouses in Goodyear, R1A reduced standards, and we did receive a letter of support from a member of the development community, and that letter is attached to your staff report. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Christian?
Christian, when I got the report, I had read all the details. I know you and I talked a little bit about it, but can you go over a couple of the examples? I know you had one picture here, and I could see the dimension, the width of the lot being 21, and I know we're allowing it to go down to 20 if needed. To give me a little comfort level of all of the different projects that we've looked at, even since I've been here, there was one by the airport, there was one out near Buckeye. What were the widths of those ones?
Why we use the number 20, they'll typically be bigger than 20, but we use the number 20 because typically in a 2-car garage that's side by side, you end up with a 20-foot wide lot.
So if we go 20, are we also allowing them the flexibility to go a third floor, or does that depend on where they're at? And then they would have to seek approval for that.
Great question. So the R1A standards, similar to the R14 and R16, allow 30-foot heights,
Okay.
which in theory you could fit a 3-story house already by right.
Okay. Yeah, the square footage of the lot, was it 1,300 square feet or 1,600 square feet for the minimum? It seems really small, but if that's only the downstairs and the garage, I guess it's reasonable. And this particular example that you've got on the screen here was very pleasant to look at, and this comes across very, very nice, so.
And to address that issue as well, there are standards for if you're gonna do an alley loaded, you have to have that front patio, it has to have a minimum distance, and those walls have to be a minimum separation from the walls across from you. So by nature, the design elements we put in there make it so that you're not just gonna cram in a bunch of houses, there's still gonna be some private area and a little bit of green space between your house and your neighbor's house.
Adding to the ability to enjoy your space. That's great. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any speaker cards?
I've not received any.
Anyone in the audience wish to speak on this agenda item? Okay, we're going to close the public hearing. Madam Secretary, would you read the recommendation?
Recommend approval for a request to consider a zoning ordinance text amendment to Articles 2-2 definitions, 3-2 residential districts, and Article 6-2 general parking regulations of the City of Goodyear zoning ordinance to create reduced R1A development standards and clarifying minimum lot area as reflected in the proposed ordinance 2024-1607. Is there a motion for the staff recommendation, or you can voice an alternate motion as well? Anything?
It's not giving us the option for motion.
Okay.
It
Well,
is
you can
mine.
voice the
I guess I
motion.
could-
Motion. I have a motion from Commissioner Hegedus,
Second.
a second from Commissioner Kish. Floor is open for commission discussion.
Any further discussion on this item?
I'm very excited to see the opportunity for the townhome product and the multifamily. I'd like to see more of that to give us a little more variety in unit types. So.
Then you won't have to say apartment.
Yes, yes, that would be a nice break too.
And I appreciate Christian's note that the state and the cities are now, the city is working with the state, are offering more housing options as a result of, legislation that possibly could have happened. So I appreciate Christian noting that. That was good.
Okay.
All right.
A manual vote?
Oh, no, I'm hoping not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hopefully you
There-
can enter
there we
your
go.
vote. Okay. Yeah, maybe not. It's not showing. Okay, so I will do voice vote. I don't even remember what I used to say. For approving, say aye. All say aye.
All right.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay, And yay. Give me one moment. Motion passes. Recommendation of approval will be forwarded to City Council for the April 29th meeting.
Thank you. Are there any staff communications?
Yes. The last meeting was the use permit work session, so I don't have a council follow-up for you because you just acted on the results of that use permit work session tonight, so that'll go before council at the next meeting. And then we do have Planning and Zoning Commission applications in review. So we do not have the vacancy filled yet, but we are still working through the process and do have several applications in to review that will go to the council subcommittee. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
I believe there's one more announcement. Katie?
Oh, yes. I was made permanent director, so I am now the Development Services Director, so thank you, Alyssa.
Good job.
Okay, the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting will be held on May the 8th, 2024, 6 p.m. in the City Council chambers. No further business. We're going to adjourn the meeting.